Hello and welcome to my review of the second episode of Game of Thrones Season 8, which was called A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. First off, I just want to touch on what a wholesome episode it was. Easily the most wholesome episode the show has ever had. Yes, shit is about to hit the fan, but I feel like the writers were giving us a moment to catch up with these characters we love and enjoy some peace with them before the battle begins. There were a couple of scenes I didn't like overall, but generally I thought it was a great episode with some amazing scenes, so let's get into it. The episode begins with Jaime Lannister having a sort of trial in front of the leaders of Winterfell. It feels like a bit of a kangaroo court. He stands before Daenerys, Jon, Sansa and Bran, and things aren't looking good for him. Dany says how she and her brother used to imagine what they'd do to the man who killed their father, and Sansa recalls the things Jaime did against the Starks prior to and during the War of the Five Kings. I actually really liked how Jaime wasn't very apologetic. Firstly, the Mad King, as his name suggests, was fucking nuts and was about to blow up King's Landing were it not for Jaime. I wish Jaime had told Dany that. Secondly, he points out that what he did to the Starks was during times of war, and the Starks spilled plenty of blood as well. You could argue that Jaime's killing of Ned's men and their duel was prior to the war, but in Jaime's defence, Catelyn had just kidnapped Tyrion, and Ned said it was by his command. So I'm glad Jaime wasn't totally apologetic there. Tyrion sticks up for his brother and points out that he knew the kind of reception he'd receive at Winterfell, but he came anyway. He really does want to help. Dany rebuffs Tyrion, and it looks like Jaime might get the chop, but then Brienne sticks up for him. She tells how Jaime has tried to be a better man, and reminds us that Jaime ended up losing his hand while convincing Locke not to let his men rape her. I also wanted her to mention how Jaime jumped into a damn bear pit for her, but she didn't. I also really liked how Bran quoted Jaime's line, "The things we do for love," back at him. I'm also kind of surprised Dany didn't mention how Jaime almost killed her during the battle between the Lannisters and the Dothraki, but I guess maybe she appreciates that this was during the heat of battle. Jon has the tie-breaking vote and he says they need all the men they can get. I love how Jon is just so done with houses and titles and petty squabbling. He just doesn't give a shit, and you can tell how tedious he finds all this. Jaime is allowed to stay, and I liked how Grey Worm gave him back his sword with a look like, "I got my eyes on you." Sansa and Dany both leave, looking rather pissed off. Dany then gives Tyrion a hard time about Cersei betraying them. Either Tyrion knew Cersei was up to something and didn't tell her, or he's a fool and isn't fit to be her hand. You've got to feel bad for the guy. I think Dany's being pretty harsh here. Tyrion did what he could to get Cersei's help, and even if he failed, then they'd still be in the same situation they are now. Tyrion turns to Varys and Jorah and says one of them may well be wearing the hand of the Kingpin soon. We then see Arya eyeing up Gendry in his forge. She's obviously got the hots for him, and that comes up later. For the most part, I liked this scene. I liked how Arya and Gendry bust each other's balls, and I liked how serious it got when Arya asked what the White Walkers are like. You can see how haunted Gendry is by them. However, I really didn't like it when Arya starts throwing the knives into the wall and talks about how much death she's seen. I hate it when Arya acts all cocky, and that's not how seasoned warriors behave, and I feel like 1 minute Arya goes from being a serious screwed up warrior based on all the terrible things she's seen, to a cocky psychopath who just seems to enjoy it all. I much prefer the character when she's the former. We then return to my favourite set in the series, the Weirwood in Winterfell. Bran is chilling out there watching interdimensional Weirwood cable when Jaime approaches. Jaime asks Bran why he didn't tell everyone that Jaime pushed him, and Bran responds that it was necessary for him to become the Three-Eyed Raven, and that he understands Jaime was also protecting his family in that moment. Like Jon, Bran is one of the few characters who's no longer concerned with titles and family ties. Jaime asks Bran if he ever intends to reveal what happened to him after the war's over, and Bran seems to hint that there might not be an after, at least not for Jaime. I personally don't think Jaime will survive this season. This was a really Jaime-focused episode, which is fine by me. We see Jaime and Tyrion walking and talking through Winterfell, and I really like seeing these two characters back together again. Both Peter and Nikolai are great actors, and I love seeing the Lannister brothers conversing. They're really the only people who understand each other. We also see how the Northerners are very distrustful of the Lannisters, but you can understand why. Tyrion and Jaime go up to the battlements, and I love how you can see they're preparing Winterfell against the White Walkers. You can even see shards of dragonglass on the wall to stop them climbing over. Jaime says he was fooled by Cersei, but Tyrion rebuffs him and says Jaime always knew what she was, but loved her anyway. Hashtag the things we do for love. Jaime recalls how Tyrion always wanted to die getting a blowjob, and then he leaves Tyrion talking to himself when he spots Brienne. Down on the training grounds, we see that Podrick, thanks to Brienne, has become a pretty solid fighter. Jaime speaks with Brienne, who gets creeped out by the fact Jaime seems to, for once, be sincere. Jaime then asks Brienne if she'll allow him to fight under her command in the left flank. This is such a great moment and shows how much respect Jaime has for Brienne as a person and as a commander. We then have a scene where Jorah sticks up for Tyrion and urges Dany to be more diplomatic with the Northerners. Dany takes this to heart and has a conversation with Sansa about how far they've both come as women in a world ruled by men. It starts off great, and Sansa also vouches for Tyrion and tells Dany how kind he was to her in King's Landing. I do have to wonder how Sansa would feel if she knew that Tyrion also strangled Shae, the only other person who was nice to her and protected her from the Lannisters. It feels like Dany and Sansa are beginning to understand one another, but the conversation breaks down when Sansa asks if Dany still intends to take the North after the war's over. Sansa also questions whether or not Dany is manipulating Jon because, let's face it, men are prone to thinking with their dicks. I liked how Dany came back with an answer that, if anything, she was manipulated. She just wants the Iron Throne, but it was Jon who convinced her to fight the White Walkers. Regarding the North's independence, Dany did agree to let the Iron Islands be independent on the condition that they stop raping and pillaging, so I do wonder if she could be convinced to let the North be free. Sansa and Dany still just can't get past the politics to face the bigger threat, but I do wonder if Sansa will eventually rule the North either as Queen or as Warden. Their conversation is then cut short when Theon arrives. He totally blanks Dany and goes straight in for a hug with Sansa. I love the bond these two have, and as I said in the last review, I'm loving Theon's redemption arc. Outside we see Davos serving what I assume is a bowl of brown to the people of Winterfell. He reassures one guy that you don't have to be a great fighter to survive a battle, and that he has an emotional moment where a plucky young girl with a scarred face insists that she wants to help the fight. I really like how Davos has a soft spot for kids, and the way you can see he respects the girl's wish to fight but also doesn't want to see her hurt. Gilly then steps in to help him out and asks the girl to help defend the women and children in the crypts. That was some great mum thinking from Gilly there. Ed, Tormund and Beric make it to Winterfell, and I loved how Jon goes in to hug Ed but then gets bear hugged by Tormund first. I love their camaraderie and how Tormund's like, "Is the big lady still here?" We then get a nice montage of the men preparing for battle, and Jon says how the enemy doesn't sleep or feel fear. We see the Unsullied have set up catapults, and Jon and the other main characters have a nice war council scene. I love how they barely manage to cram all the characters into one room. Brad explains how the Night King wants a winter that lasts forever, and that he wants to wipe the memory of man from Westeros. Given that Bran is like Westeros' Google, he knows that the Night King will want to destroy him first. Sam chimes in and states how death is ultimately the absence of memory, it's nothingness. That rings back to how the Maester Sam studied under in the Citadel remarked that Maesters are the memories of Westeros. I feel like Sam will go on to record a lot of this history. He will record the Song of Ice and Fire. Bran suggests they use him as bait in the Godswood in the hope that they can bait the Night's King and kill him to hopefully destroy all the Whites. I do wonder if this is a red herring. It would be really cool if the plan is successful and they do kill the Night King, but his army doesn't fall with him. Theon says that he and the Ironborn crew will stay with Bran to protect him. It's really fitting that Theon, who once tried to kill Bran and Rickon, is now going to risk his life for Bran. I could see Theon dying to protect Bran, and that would resolve his arc nicely. Arya then asks if Dragonfire can kill the Night's King, but no one knows. I mean, given that it can melt stone, I'd assume it can, but Dany will be risking her dragons getting that close to the Night's King. Tyrion then points out that he's seen combat and could be of some use in the fight, but Dany won't allow him to risk his life as she needs his mind to help the war effort. I felt like this was Dany's way of telling Tyrion she forgives him for his screw-ups and that she knows she needs him. The War Council disperses and Tyrion remains with Bran and asks to hear his story. The scene cuts before we get to hear what Bran has to say, but I do wonder if Bran tells Tyrion some important information. Later in the episode, Tyrion seems quite cheerful and says he thinks that they might survive, which makes me wonder if Bran reveals how things will end to Tyrion. We then have a lovely scene between the cutest couple in Westeros, Missandei and Grey Worm. It was a lovely scene, but I felt like it was heavily hinting that either one or both characters will die. Missandei tells Grey Worm she'd like to return to Narth when the war's over, and Grey Worm promises to take her there. A lot of people think Grey Worm will die in battle, but I personally think it'd be way more devastating if Missandei dies. She's the only good thing Grey Worm's ever had, and I can see him watching her die and then going mental, breaking ranks from the Unsullied and just going crazy on the White Walkers till they eventually kill him. What does he have to live without Missandei? Another heartbreaking ending would be if Missandei dies and Grey Worm survives, and he fulfills his promise and takes her body back to Narth and protects the people there. Another great scene occurs between the remaining men of the Night's Watch, and we finally get to see Ghost again. I love that we got a moment to see these characters together and for them to reflect on how far they've come. I also really like that they mentioned Gren and Pip, who fell during the Battle of the Wall, and I like that Ed got a callback line to whoever's left, burn the rest of us. I really hope Ed survives all this. It was a really touching scene between brothers in arms, recalling everything they've won and lost. John also offers Sam the chance to stay in the crypts during the battle, and Sam is like, go fuck yourself. He also points out that he killed a White Walker and a Then. I get that John was trying to look out for Sam, but Sam's no coward. He has Gilly and Little Sam to fight for now. We cut to Jaime and Tyrion sat by the fire discussing what their father would think if he could see his sons risking their lives for Winterfell. They're then joined by Podrick and Brienne, and I love how Jaime immediately stands up when Brienne enters, and Tyrion gives him this look. I really like how Brienne doesn't want to drink the night before a battle, and she tells Podrick he can have half a glass. She's like his mother. You then see Tyrion pour Podrick a cup that overflows. Tormund and Davos join the party, and you can see how Tormund's slightly jealous of Brienne and Jaime. I love the way he gets Jaime's nickname wrong, calling him King Killer, and kind of assumes this is a name Jaime is proud of, rather than something he's ashamed of. Tormund then tries to impress Brienne by saying he's called Giantsbane because when he was a kid, he killed a giant and then slept with its wife and was suckled by it. This is a story Tormund tells in the books, and earlier in the series he also claimed he fucked a bear. Then he takes a big long chug from his drinking horn. The Hound is enjoying one last drink on the wall when he's approached by Arya. The Hound is a character who spent most of his life fighting and doing terrible things for a cause he didn't care about, but now he finally has a cause to believe in. He's come a long way from the Sandor we knew in Season 1, and a lot of change has occurred during his travels with Arya. I like how Sandor pointed out that he did fight for Arya, and almost lost his life in the process, and though Arya may not like him, I think she does respect him, and him her. Beric then turns up, and Arya says she's no longer on her list. It's good to see that Arya progresses. She realises that not everyone on her list is as black and white in their morals as she first thought. Arya then tells the two men that she's not about to spend her last evening with those two shits, and goes to find Gendry to check her weapon. Gendry gives her what appears to be a kind of spear with a detachable dragonglass head. I really like that Arya's main weapon against the White Walkers is a staff, because she would definitely be better with a staff than a sword, thanks to her time in the House of Black and White. Arya then gets to her point and starts seducing Gendry. She asks how many women he's been with and also inquires about how Melisandre once tied him down, had sex with him, and put a leech on his dick. It's during this scene that Gendry reveals to Arya that he's the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, making him the last surviving Baratheon. This made me recall how King Robert once said to Ned they should unite their families by marrying their children. At the time, Robert meant Sansa and Joffrey, but I do wonder if the season might end with Gendry and Arya as a couple. Anyway, Arya then initiates sexy time and Gendry reciprocates. Some people have said they found it a bit weird seeing a character we've known since she was like 12 having a sex scene, but Arya's meant to be 18 at this point, so I don't personally think it's that weird. Arya's never done the deed before, and you can understand how someone her age would want to know what it's like to have sex before a battle she knows she may not survive. Let's be honest, this is not the weirdest relationship in Game of Thrones. It was consensual and neither were related. That puts it head and shoulders above most sex scenes in the series. In a more meta way, I also think it's Maisie Williams' way of telling viewers she's not a child anymore. We may still think of her as a little girl we saw in Season 1, but a lot of time has passed since then. Back in the party of Winterfell, Tyrion says he thinks they might survive the battle, which does make me wonder if he was told something by Bran that's made him more optimistic about their chances. Tormund then learns that Brienne isn't a knight and says he'd knight her 10 times over. Brienne says she doesn't want to be a knight, and I love how she and Podrick exchange a look where Podrick knows she's lying. Great way to have two characters express themselves without saying a word. Jaime points out that it only requires a knight to make another knight. He tells Brienne to kneel and knights her, and I goddamn nearly cried. I love how all the other characters stood up, because when you think about it, they're witnessing history here, the first woman to be made a knight in Westeros. I feel like this scene was equally impactful for both characters. For Brienne, it's what she's dreamed of all her life, but for Jaime, it was also his way of trying to produce some more good in the world. He may have been a terrible knight, but maybe he can set that right by creating a great knight in Brienne. As he charges her to be brave and to protect the innocent and to be just, you realise she's exemplified these qualities since she first appeared. I also want to add that, after Gendry and Arya got it on, I did wonder if Jaime and Brienne might also. She's also never been laid, and Jaime chastised her for this when he was her captor. Given that it may be their last night on Earth, I wondered if they might do the deed, but I actually feel like this was way more meaningful, especially the fact that it's Jaime who knights her. In a way, it's more intimate for them than sex. I love how everyone cheered and clapped, and it was so nice to see Brienne smile like that. I hope she goes on to knight Podrick. In the next scene we see Jorah arguing with Lyanna Mormont about her wanting to fight in the battle. To be fair, you can see his point. Jorah doesn't expect to survive this fight, and if Lyanna dies too, then House Mormont will be extinguished. However, there's no arguing with her, and Lyanna makes it clear she's going into battle. Sam then interrupts and gives Jorah Heartsbane, the Tarly Valyrian steel sword. This kind of echoes how Jeor Mormont, Jorah's father, gave the Mormont family sword Longclaw to Jon, and even though he will be fighting, Sam knows Jorah's a better knight and he'll make more use of the weapon. We then cut to another amazing scene where Podrick sings an old song called Jenny of Oldstones. Now, this is a song that's heard several times in the books and appears to include some cryptic information about the Targaryens. Show watchers probably have no idea who Jenny is or the significance of this song, and I don't blame them. I've read the books and I had to look up the finer details. Simply put, years ago, a Targaryen named Duncan Targaryen, who I believe I'm right in saying would be Dany's great uncle, he was Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the throne, but one day he happened to meet a mysterious young woman named Jenny, who was apparently very beautiful and wore flowers in her hair. Duncan fell in love with the girl and married her, despite the fact he was betrothed to the daughter of Lionel Baratheon. This obviously caused an uproar, and Duncan's father, King Aegon, attempted to call off the marriage, and even got the High Septon and Grand Maester and Small Council to stage an intervention to try and convince Duncan to put the realm above his feelings for Jenny. Rather than give up Jenny, Duncan abdicated his right to the throne and became known as the Prince of Dragonflies. The trouble didn't end there. Lionel Baratheon was so enraged over the snubbing of his daughter that he renounced his loyalty to the Targaryens and declared himself Storm King and ignited a rebellion. The rebellion, though bloody, was cut short when a great knight named Sir Duncan the Tall slew Lionel in single combat. Prince Duncan later died during a mysterious event known as the Tragedy of Summerhall, which also killed his father and Sir Duncan the Tall. There's an excellent in-depth video about this made by a YouTuber named Azor Hype, and I'll leave a link in the description. Simply put, the inclusion of this song could be foreshadowing how the series will end. A montage plays of Sam and Gilly snuggled up in bed, Theon and Sansa eating together, and Grey Worm and Missandei. The somber tone of the song seems to be hinting that some or all of these characters will die. After Pod stops singing, we have a scene between Dany and Jon where Dany learns that they're related. Dany seems more concerned about the fact her claim to the throne has been weakened, rather than being happy there's another Targaryen in the world. Prince Duncan gave up his throne for Jenny, but will Dany be willing to do the same for Jon? Or maybe Jon will give up his claim for Dany? I do have to wonder why Jon chose this moment to give Dany the news. It creates a rift between them at a time when they need to be strong, but he could have waited till after the battle. If he or Dany die, then it's not a problem, but if they survive, then they can hash it out. Maybe he was going to tell her, but they're interrupted by 3 blows of the horn, which signifies White Walkers are coming. The episode then ends with a large number of White Walkers arriving with the army of the undead. Are you ready for shit to hit the fan? I have to admit, this episode really took me by surprise. I thought the first episode would be the one where we see the characters reuniting and such, but I feel like the first episode of this one could be considered one long episode. Yes, it was a bit of a slow burner, but I really liked that we got the time to see these characters we've loved for years have a moment of calm with one another before all hell lets loose. The Battle of Winterfell is apparently the biggest battle we've ever seen in the series, and will be one of the biggest battles ever shot on film. Make no mistake, characters are seriously in danger now, and those of you who want to see more action are about to get heaps of it. The stakes have never been higher, and, as Avengers fans say, we're in the endgame now. This is it, people, the culmination of almost a decade. Let's raise a glass to our favourite characters and wish them well in the wars to come. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. That really helps my channel to grow. Please let me know what you thought of the episode. I really want to hear your thoughts. I'll be analysing every episode of this season of Game of Thrones, so stay tuned for the next one, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.